Hello everyone, this is DM Gashbad here with my after-tournament report for the Batman miniature game. Now, if you've watched my previous video, you know this was my first tournament and my first games with the Batman miniature game. And I want to say right off the bat, in my first video I predicted there was about a 75% chance that the tournament would be canceled due to poor attendance. Well, I was sort of right and sort of wrong. Only one person besides myself and the tournament organizer showed up, but I did get to play a couple of games. I played that one person and the tournament organizer himself. And an upshot of all that was, let me just put this here and scroll up a little bit. And ta-da! There you go. Green Arrow won all his games, and I got this certificate to show what a big winner I am with this non-tournament that only had one other participant. But hey, I'll take it, absolutely. I'm certifiably insane, as reported by Hugo Strange. And so, yeah, spoiler alert, Green Arrow did really, really well. So I thought I would go over the games character by character and just tell you guys my thoughts on how everyone did. So the first game against the other participant was against a Bane crew. He had Arkham Asylum Bane. I guess it would be technically what was the second game? Arkham City, probably the Arkham City game. Bane. He had Dallas. He had Smash. He had Ted Hunter out there hunting some Teds, and he had Mohawk. Oh, and he had Killer Frost. So anyway, we'll start with the man himself right here, Oliver Queen. Oliver Queen just had a phenomenal first game. So first turn, I saved Oliver Queen to activate last. He had Dallas, who had traded in his night vision goggles for a grapple gun. He had him grapple up to the top of some shipping containers. So then Oliver Queen, he hook arrowed down, and since Oliver Queen has stealth and Dallas does not, that means he ended up about 30 centimeters away from Dallas, so Oliver Queen could see Dallas, but Dallas couldn't see him. Just for good measure, he shot Dallas in the face with an arrow. And then next turn, I was feeling pretty good, even if I didn't get the first turn, because I knew Dallas wouldn't be able to shoot me with his full rate of fire. But it doesn't matter since I got the first turn. So straight away, Oliver dropped his multi-fire shot straight into Dallas, took him out of the game right away, and that made me really pleased. My opponent then ran up a couple of his characters. He ran up Killer Frost and Smash to grab an objective right in front of Oliver Queen. Next round, Oliver Queen did another multi-fire straight into Smash's face, killed him. That was great. The round after that, he did a full round of fire into Killer Frost, knocked her down. He had to use the concussion arrow at that point, which meant that he was out of ammo, but he had done a great job. He was getting a little bit surrounded at that point, so he had to start hook arrowing away to grab objectives, but he had an absolutely phenomenal game. He took out two characters, he knocked out a hired gun, and he was everything you would expect from the TV character, so I was really pleased about that. The game itself, I might as well mention this, was Trophy. So he was moving on the left-hand side. I'll throw a picture up of what that battlefield looked like. I did what I said I wasn't going to do. I put him on a tall tower to have him firing down. I know I said I wanted to keep him on ground level, but we just had tons of street lights, and that tower in my deployment zone just gave me a great field of fire, so I just couldn't resist it, and it worked out pretty well. Also, Trophy has these weird L-shaped deployment zones, which meant that Mr. Barry Allen, TV's The Flash, could use his flash powers to run up really quickly and grab one of my opponent's loot counters. So he did that, and he activated very early on, and then ran straight back to hand that loot off to Officer Hall over here. I think last video I accidentally called her Officer Hale, but yeah, it's Officer Hall right there, Gotham policewoman. Anyway, so he handed the loot off to her. Officer Hall spent the rest of the game hiding with her loot, getting me a nice 5 victory points. So she's kind of the unsung hero of that whole thing. So Flash then zipped off, trying to get a couple more objectives. He tried to do some Speed Force powers, but he managed to paradox himself into the next day, or I guess the previous day, which was a little disappointing at the time because I wanted him to accomplish some stuff. But it ended up not being too bad because he showed up on my opponent's table edge where I had stowed a lot of riddle counters. So he solved those 2 riddles and then zipped over to my to the far corner and grabbed a Titan container objective, and that probably won me the game at the very end. So yeah, so Flash had a really good game himself. The rest of the cops were having some problems. John Diggle and Officer Joe West, there, Gotham policeman, they tried to run up to secure the main objective. Joe West here had a whistle, and I was hoping to stop Bane from charging up too fast, but that didn't work out great. Bane came up to the center objective, and we put a lot of damage on him. We got him down to about half health, but he clobbered both those guys. So Joe West is just out of it. Diggle, man, he absorbed a lot of damage. The Kevlar vest was not as good as I thought it was going to be. It didn't really help that much. But just because John Diggle has that huge endurance, he kept waking up, getting knocked down. He just took all this damage because Bane ran in. Then my opponent's Mohawk ran in, and they were just surrounding my guys. But Diggle was a trooper. He had to, at the end, he was surrounded by Killer Frost, who had woken up after Arrow shot her a bunch. He was surrounded by Bane. He was surrounded by Mohawk. But he was a real trooper. He did really well. So I've already mentioned Officer Hall grabbed some loot and hid, which was great. Officer Lance over here, he didn't have such a great game. He moved up a little bit, and then Ted Hunter ran up and shot him with a shotgun, and that was the end of him, so that was too bad. But otherwise, I grabbed a whole bunch of victory points very early on with the Flash and Arrow. Gave me a really good lead, and even though my opponent started racking up a lot of points later on because he was wiping out all my cops and he had that center objective, he just couldn't catch up fast enough. So it was a nice win for the Arrow crew. So yeah, I think I'll go on to the next game right now. So that's it. You know, the tournament was over. I won my game and I came in first. Hooray! But I did get another game in with the organizer himself. He was using a Court of Owls crew, which I have to admit, I'm really not familiar with the Court of Owls, just because I haven't seen, I haven't read any comics with them. I haven't seen them in a movie or anything like that, so forgive me if I'm a little bit confused about all this. But again, I had the same side of the board. Again, there were tons of street lights. And again, I did what I said I wasn't going to do, and I put Oliver Queen up on a tall tower, thinking that if you wanted to move in to grab these objectives, he was going to have a tough time avoiding all the streetlights. So, which was this scenario? This was like the loot scenario with all the objectives in the center strip. Arrow did not have as good a game this round. My opponent was more aware of where he was, what he was capable of doing, so he kind of kept his people away from spots where I'd be able to shoot him a lot. So he rushed up a bunch of characters on my left, and I had Oliver Queen backclawed down, ready to shoot a bunch of those guys because there's 3 of them, and I didn't think they could all get away. Unfortunately, some stuff happened, and he ran up one of his assassin guys, William Cobb. He ran him up so that he could base both Oliver Queen and Officer Hall over here. So that was bad. So that meant Oliver Queen couldn't shoot that second round. So I actually ran up to my center Titan objective to get some points instead. That center objective was just surrounded by lampposts, so my opponent didn't really want to go into there. He only had one shooting character, so he was entirely on the flanks, so I thought, okay, the center is the safest spot. So Oliver Queen ran up there. So yeah, Oliver Queen more or less spent the rest of the time hanging out on that center objective, gathering points and not doing a ton. My opponent did send Brandon O'Malley, I believe, to go try to assassinate Mr. Queen, but he didn't succeed, and in the very last turn, Oliver Queen darted away, turned around, shot Brandon O'Malley in the face with a concussion arrow, blinded him, and that may have saved me a bunch of points there, because then he was blind and he couldn't grab any points either from trying to assassinate Oliver Queen or any of my cops that were nearby. So then the Flash himself, let's go on to Barry Allen. So Barry Allen, I kind of tried to do the exact same thing again. I tried to rush him out. So he had a bunch of guys on the left, and I tried to rush him out right in the middle of all that. Let's see if I can get this to focus at all. It's being a little bit difficult. I thought to myself, I can rush him, base one of those riddles. He's going to get to go before me, so one of his characters will move in, and he might try to beat up the Flash. But with defense 5 and a bunch of defense counters, I thought he would be okay. Then I would solve the riddle and run away, and I'd be great. Well, it didn't work out super well, because he sent in the Butcher. And the Butcher did a real number on Barry Allen. He smashed him to the ground. He caused a bunch of damage. I lost all my counters, so all I could do in my turn was stand up, which I had to do. Otherwise, the rest of his guys were going to pile in and really cause some problems on him. So that wasn't great, but he did survive. So I did manage to get him out of there, but he spent the rest of the game essentially running away from the Butcher. The Butcher was just trying to chase him down and beat him up, and so he spent all of his time, all of his Speed Force powers just moving away and healing the damage he took on that second turn. So he didn't do as well as last game, but then again, he didn't die, and he did provide a couple of opportunities. Number one, Detective Lance over here, or Officer Lance in this case, he was over on the right, and he was getting charged by Strix. Strix threw 2 knives at him, what would have been, very early on in the game, and caused him 2 blood damage. So that wasn't great. And I think my opponent wanted to finish off Officer Lance the next round as quick as he could, but I don't think he expected the Flash to get as beat up as he did, or he didn't expect Flash to be in a position where he could get surrounded by all those guys on the left. So while he was beating up the Flash, he left Strix standing right in front of Officer Lance's gun, and he fired 3 shots, and she didn't have any movement dice, and he hit all 3 times, and he dropped Strix, which was great. And then, a little bit surprised by that, he moved up into base contact with her, ready to put the cuffs on her next round, which he did. So then he was kind of out of people to fight, so he wandered around the backfield. Eventually, the Butcher, while wandering around trying to catch the Flash, got a hold of him and smashed him to the ground. And I think his leader, what's his leader's name again? It was Benjamin Orchard. I think Benjamin Orchard actually took him out of the game, but either way, he had an absolutely great game. I was really pleased about what he did. Speaking of great game, that brings us now to Diggle over here. So, if you might remember, the one guy, so in around the first or second turn, Flash used his Speed Force Lightning Bolt to zap, what was his name, William Cobb, and so he did a little bit of damage to William Cobb. William Cobb ran in and then based both Officer Hall and Arrow over here, so that was a bit of a problem. So, as I said, I had Arrow run away to grab an objective, but that left a clear line of sight between Mr. Diggle over here and William Cobb. So he fired all 3 shots, hit all 3 times, which is not surprising because he gets to reroll his hit dice with his pistol. And William Cobb took all the damage. He dropped right at Officer Hall's feet. Officer Hall slapped the cuffs on him the very next activation, and there you go. There was one of my opponent's strongest guys just taken out round 2. So that was great. So Officer Diggle then wandered over to help out Joe West. Joe West was facing down Zhao Lung. He had run up the far right-hand side of the board. He grabbed a loot of his, Well, we had a little bit of a standoff there for a while, but then Zhao Lung tried to run over to grab an ammo objective, but Joe West here used his whistle, so he could not get very far. Could not get very far. Ended up right in range of Diggle. Diggle again fired all 3 shots, dropped Zhao Lung. Officer West ran up, put the cuffs on him. That was the end of that guy. So that was great. So yeah, who was left? So we put the cuffs on Zhao Lung, we put the cuffs on Strix, we put the cuffs on William Cobb. All he had left was the Butcher, who ended up not hurt. His leader was not hurt, but he hadn't really accomplished a lot. And we had a blind Brandon O'Malley in the middle of the field, and I just had a ton of points from objectives and from getting rid of those Court of Owls guys, who I guess give me extra victory points because they are reanimated dead folk, I guess. But anyway, that was a really big win. My opponent called it before we had completely finished. But yeah, so really happy about that. Really happy about, I love the Arrow TV show, so I was a little worried that I'd embarrass my guys and they wouldn't do very well. But no, they performed really well, and the game was not as intimidating as I thought it might be. So I might discuss that a little bit further on another video, but for now I think I'll call it there. Anyway, my thanks to my opponents, and my thanks to you watching this. I hope it helped. So yeah, I will see you on the next one.